So let's create an SSID and configure it entirely. So you know now what the authentication is going to be like. So let's go back here and create one SSID, for example, Auto31 that will associate to VLAN 31. And you see I can associate it to a VLAN because I have VLANs, I have to do that. And because VLAN 31 is only on radio 1, remember, I need to make sure that I only check radio 1 interface, because if I check radio 0, again, I will have a problem enabling that SSID simply because there is a mismatch between the VLAN, which is associated to radio 1, and the SSID on that VLAN, which is supposed to be on both radios, so that doesn't work. So be sure to write down what the mapping is going to be. Usually you would know what you're doing, right? So you would not be associating a VLAN to one radio if your SSID was supposed to be on both. But keep that in mind. There is this incompatibility risk here, and the interface is not always going to give you a warning. Okay, you can also set the network ID if you want to set an identifier for that SSID, but most of the time you won't need to bother with that. So we go back here to the authentication, and for this one I'm going to use, let's say, open with a pre-shared key for LPAV2. So because it's LPAV2, the 802.11 pure authentication is going to be open with no addition, no MAC, no IP fast. I'm not going to use any IP server because it's pre-shared key, but I'm still going to say that I want to use key management because I'm going to use the LPA. So I check key management is mandatory and I enable the LPA V1 or V2. I'm going to go for V2 because it's AES CCNP. Notice that I can also use 802.11r if I use the LPA V2. So for now, I'm just going to use the LPAV2 natively, but notice FT is there. That's where you enable FT, fast transition. And because it's pre-shared key, now I have to define a pre-shared key for the LPA. Of course, if I was using IP, I would not fill that information because it would be the PMK would be derived from the authentication. But here it's pre-shared key, so let's put Cisco 123, password, and done. You'll see in that page there are also a lot of other options that you can configure. Most of them, you don't need to worry about those. Few mention that you may recognize MFP, we mentioned that. AP authentication is when you have a bridge and you want to authenticate the access points to connect to the root bridge. You may remember that concept. So there are a few other options here that are maybe a bit more advanced, but in a normal SSID configuration, you don't need to worry too much about those. You just go to the bottom of the page and click apply. Oh, by the way, be careful. There are 2 apply buttons on that page. So let me go cancel and show you. There is the apply in that section that you just configure with the key management, etc. And there is another apply button at the bottom for another section with this guest mode infrastructure. Careful, you have to click the right button, the one at the top. Once you've done that, you have validated your SSID, and then you may have to go at the bottom in the last section because this is where you're going to decide if you want to broadcast the SSID. This is specific to the autonomous access point. By default, the SSID is not broadcasted. If you want to broadcast the SSID, which is what we would do today in most SSIDs, you have to go to whatever radio and decide that you want to broadcast that SSID. That field you see at the bottom is useful if there is only one single SSID per radio, you just broadcast it. If you have more than one SSID per radio, you'll need to check multiple BSSID here, and then in the SID configuration just at the top of the screen, you would check this Set SSID as Guest Mode. Okay, so that's Auto31. We have one SSID for now. Let's create the other one, for example, Auto23. So this one I'm going to use IP. It's still going to be LPAV2, but this time I want to use an IP server. So I'm going to pick up one. I could use default and I would point to ICE by default, but I'm going to use the access points. It's still the LPA, so I'm still checking key management mandatory. I'm still using the LPAV2. And here, of course, I don't need to define a pre-shared key because I'm using IP. So the PMK is going to be derived from IP. Same as usual, there are other options I can set. I don't need to set them. Click apply. And because now I will have 2 SSIDs on the 5 radio, I set SSID as guest mode inside the SSID configuration. And now I can go to this bottom section and say that on the radio 1, I have multiple BSSIDs. On the radio 0, I don't have multiple SSIDs, so I just check single BSSID and enable whatever SSID is associated to that interface. All right, click apply. So the thing I have not done yet is be on Auto31 SSID and also enable the broadcast. So let me check that one, go back here and check that box in the SSID configuration to say set SSID as guest mode. All right, so now both my SSIDs are configured, both of them are broadcasting their name. I can associate to either of the 2. One SSID is on one radio with pre-shared key LPAV2. The other SSID is on both radios with IP and LPAV2.